Welcome to More Than Renovating, a renovate and real estate podcast. Our founder, Belinda Smith, talks to industry experts to provide you with the knowledge and information you need to make renovating for love and profit your reality. Belinda will also chat to some of her Renovation Mastery members who are just everyday people doing extraordinary things, following their passions in the renovation and property space. So, let's jump straight into the episode. Enjoy.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Belinda Smith from Renovate and Real Estate. And today on this little session of More Than Renovating, our More Than Renovating podcast, I have with me Alex Sitt. Now, Alex Sitt is a guy, a student of ours. I've known for, I think, about 4 years now. Alex joined me in 2017 and has been with the Renovate and Real Estate community ever since then. Alex is from the Gold Coast. Alex has got quite a history in property, of which we'll delve into today a little bit. He's currently working for a company called Maisonettes. Alex, I'll get you to start by explaining what that company is and what you do now.
Yeah, so hey Belinda, thanks for having me on. So as you were saying, I work for a company called Maisonettes. I run Queensland up here. It's a short-term leasing company, so similar to a traditional real estate agency. However, we exclusively deal in short-term leasing as well as executive type leasing, mainly towards the short-term style, but you pivot when you need to pivot, as is prevalent in the last couple of years.
Yeah, definitely COVID has put a big dampener on an industry like yours. So explain short-term leasing. You mean somebody who wants to stay somewhere for, say, 6 weeks for a job, or do you mean holiday letting? What?
The name that everyone would know is Airbnb. So They're one of the biggest in the industries for short-term leasing. But it's anything from hotels. There's other websites, stays.com, your traditional bed and breakfasts back in the day. Very similar stuff to that. So we act as an agent. We actually rent our properties through a lot of these channels like Airbnb, stays.com, booking.com, Expedia, TripAdvisor, the list kind of goes on and on and on. At times, depending on the integrations with different websites, we can have, up to 50, 70 different websites that we'll go out to. The current climate has rendered a lot of those websites most recently not very useful, unfortunately. And so we definitely have seen a drop off from those websites. But, you still have your steady Airbnb, booking.com style properties, as well as just through our website directly.
And knowing you as long as I have, I know that you're a man of many talents. So let's start with what some of those are. I remember doing an event and you came up to me at an event and you said, "Hey, Belinda, I do some photography, real estate photography, and also personal profile kind of photography too." So I've looked at your photography work, which is just genius, number one. Number two, renovation and property. So photography, is that something you engage in anymore? Is that work that you want in the real estate industry? Or do you just do it on behalf of this business now to help property owners get their places let out?
Yeah, so photography has always been my passion. I think as early as I can remember, I've always had this love for photography and storytelling, specifically video. I've done some work in the movie business, very small amount of work in the movie business, doing things like construction and all that kind of stuff. But it's the storytelling sector of that I really enjoy. I have moved away from doing commercial photography myself a little bit in the last maybe 2 years, just because I wanted to concentrate on other things. And it's an industry that requires a kind of doggedness about you in that space. So you really have to be on it all the time. It's an art in most cases, and it really does determine, well, I'd say your jobs are determined based on how hard you're working in it. And so you really have to be on top of everybody, trying to pull in those contacts. So now I do it here and there, but not as much.
And so, Alex, you have family that you need to juggle in amongst this, kids? And
I have 2 kids. I also look after my mother now. So she's getting a little bit older and she's all on her own. So we've all decided to move in together. It's a bit of an interesting experiment of sorts, but
experiment, yeah.
It works for
now.
Yeah. We haven't killed each other yet. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, that's so nice that you do that. I really appreciate that you do that. And your mum's a lovely lady. I've met your mum. Okay. So it was actually you and your mum came to one of our first events. Have you used the knowledge that you learnt about renovating? And I know you've done other people's events too in the property space. So like, what have you done with the knowledge that you've accumulated through my program and others?
To answer that question, absolutely. Originally, why we came to you, my mother and myself, was my mother had just become a widow, or was very close to, I believe, at that stage. And she had a whole bunch of properties herself that she wasn't sure what to do with. And I had no idea what to do with them because I'd never done anything in real estate. My background originally was in ships. I drove boats.
In the Navy?
Yeah, in the Merchant Navy. So when I came back, there was these properties, they were fully mortgaged. In some cases, they were mortgaged more than the property was worth. And there was no one at the helm, flog a dead horse of nautical puns here, but there was no one at the helm, and effectively someone had to do something. I had plenty of time off. I'd just come off the ship, so I was cashed up, time. I was in the middle of a divorce, so it kind of all worked out really well. And I decided I would take over their projects for them as a way of, I suppose, proving myself and helping them along the way. So with your course, it was interesting. I didn't have enough money to typically go and do these big developments, but I did have enough money where I could renovate a property and sell it. But my design eye is not that great. I'm willing to accept that and acknowledge that. So I needed help from Belinda. So learning about the different types of tiling and styles and textures really helped me move my properties, and move our properties rather, to kind of another level where I could sell them off, not spend as much money as I probably would have otherwise, move that money into the next deal and go from there.
So you were trying to unravel yourself, or more importantly, your mum, from a situation where you had a lot of properties and they weren't performing very well to create wealth, either from the rental income or from the property values themselves. They weren't doing that great.
Yeah, I think at the start, when I first came on, we were probably losing about $4,000 a month.
Yeah, that was
so. Yeah, and we weren't making any equity. So it was eye-opening.
Something had to give.
Exactly.
But how young were you when you took these on? Oh, is that a rude question? Because I was going to unveil.
No, I must have been, when I started, I must have been 27, 28, maybe, I think. So it was an interesting time. It was a big change. I was still kind of learning who I was as an individual, and as a father especially, because I had very young kids at that stage. But it would have been about 27, 28, I think, around the time that I met you.
Yeah. Oh, so brave. And I just loved having you and your mum in those workshops. And I knew it was really important for you guys to be able to wiggle your way out of the situation. Now, as time's gone on, property prices have gone up a lot, but property prices, when we met you back then, weren't doing a lot. So you had to physically work out a strategy to get rid of these homes, or to only hold on the ones that were going to actually put money in your pocket and not be so draining on you financially.
So I had 2 properties in Brisbane.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, at that time, Brisbane wasn't doing very well.
Agree.
They were in nice neighbourhoods, but not in a city. So they were within 10 Ks. However, at that stage, 10 Ks wasn't enough. You kind of had to be within the 5K limit. So I remember having one property in Maruka. That was probably the biggest one I took on at first. There was a property in Maruka, and everyone used to call it the African suburb.
All right, yeah.
Which was an interesting one for me, because I went there to stay there, to see what the property was like, see what I could do with it. I loved it.
Yeah.
The people were so beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, we're in a tiny little street with tree-lined street. No traffic came through it. It was very close to Ipswich Road and the Magic Mile in Maruka, but you couldn't hear any of the noise from traffic. You were within a couple of minutes into Brisbane City, and I had a huge 810 square metre block, and it was already on two different blocks on a single title.
All right.
One single title, but two separate blocks.
So what did you do with that property?
So that property, actually really liked it. It was an older property, it had the cast iron baths and everything, but it was requiring of a lot of TLC. I originally went in there as a Band-Aid fix. I just spruced it up. I think this was before I'd met you, actually. So I'd gone in, I'd prettied it up as much as I could. I did look at selling it, but no one was interested. I couldn't even get enough to pay off the mortgage. So I decided, okay, well, if I rent it out, at least there's something. It won't be paying back the mortgage, but it'll be better than nothing.
Yeah.
I moved on from that deal to another property in Southport that we had, and all the while, I believe some tenants moved in that weren't particularly interested in taking care of this property, and eventually it started to get lower and lower and more dilapidated, and eventually police were called and they left the house.
Sorry, is this in your Southport property?
No, this was in the Maruka house.
So the one you've just done a nice refresh of to attract hopefully better tenants and better rental income. You had tenants move in there and they didn't look after it.
No, unfortunately not. They actually trashed the place, broke a couple of windows. And when I eventually got back in there, maybe 6 months later, it had been abandoned. No one had paid the rent in the last couple of weeks. And I looked around, couldn't imagine myself renovating it again, and decided, okay, well, something's got to change. At that point, the best thing to do was we already had 2 blocks. I could see the price in the market was fairly steady. People were wanting to buy, but there wasn't a lot of buyers. And I knew if I can get a house on there, I can, put a nice-ish house, have the blocks separated, and I can sell one block just as is, and somebody with a first homeowners will come in, and it was fairly reasonably priced, so they would have definitely been able to come in, buy, build a house and move in and get all the grants that are associated with that. So we decided to do that. We bought a house. We looked for quite a while to find a house that would fit on this particular block. It was very narrow. Found a Queenslander up in Stafford, brought it by truck and put it on the block. So that was an ordeal on itself, to be honest. I'd never done that before. Never thought of doing that.
Thought about moving in a house and putting it on a block. And then did you have to renovate that house?
It was somewhat renovated, but not that well. It was, it was painted and it was fresh, but it wasn't modern. It wasn't looking good. It wasn't even a little bit nice. That, obviously when you move a house, things you've got to be aware of is the whole house moves.
Yeah.
And you get cracking, you get all the walls start to shift a little bit. All of a sudden the electricals have to be redone because they're not up to code. Now, that was something I learned as well, 6 months without power because we couldn't get the power connected. Every time the Energex would come to connect the power, there was something wrong. So we'd fix it, and then they'd come back and they'd find something else wrong. And then they'd go and they'd come back. And then by the time they came back, the tree in front of the yard that was underneath the electrical lines had grown, and now they had to cut the electrical line because they weren't going to connect it. So they go and they come back, and you're trying to find people who's the responsibility of cutting this tree.
Yeah.
These simple things.
Yeah. So you've definitely had some trials and tribulations along the way. So did you end up selling that property? Like, what was the outcome from that particular property?
Yeah, so I did actually. I sold the block.
Yeah.
That block funnily enough, almost a year ago, the whole block with the house, 2 blocks rather, with the house, didn't even pay off the mortgage. So I split the block. That 1 block paid off the mortgage.
Yeah, there you go.
And I had a second house with, 100,000 for the moving of the house and everything, plus a little bit extra for renovations. And that was effectively free money.
So you changed a situation that was costing you money every month to something that was now going to look after itself effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone gets a little bit, well, maybe not everyone, but I know that I felt worried selling a house because you feel that if you sell it, then you're missing out on something, missing out on some opportunity that you aren't aware of. But the biggest load came off my shoulders, not having that extra debt.
Yeah.
And being able to take that money and put it into another house, pay off that debt. So now the interest payments are so much less and I can afford to do more with that money.
So look, I'm with you. I think that there's too much pressure put on to the statement, buy and never sell. I think that people ought not be thinking that. That puts people into a situation where they're not prepared to go to their plan B, and you went to your plan B. So that's awesome. Right.
Yeah,
so
I think plan A didn't exist at that time.
Plan A was gone out the window. All right. So your Southport property, what happened with that?
So that one's been a bit of a, I suppose, a silent trooper in the whole game. Bought it very cheap.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I think in the 90s or the 80s, my parents bought that one.
Yeah.
And that one had close to no mortgage and was just ticking over. It was a double brick house, nice tiled ceiling, tiled roof rather, freestanding. Most of it was concrete slab. So there really was nothing to worry about with that house. It just ticked over, kept paying rent and just kept ticking over. It did not really go up in value, unfortunately, for most of its life. It's pretty much stayed the same. In the last probably year, it's gone up significantly.
Yeah.
But for most of its time, especially while I was working with it, it didn't really go anywhere. So it was just a refresh and a rent out. That was the best thing I could do, up the rent, get as much money out of it as I could in terms of a weekly basis, and then I could move on and do another one.
So you've got that property as well, and that's sitting there, and its situation has improved for you.
Yeah. So currently I've managed to pay off the whole mortgage, so it's mortgage free, which is really good.
Amazing. Yep.
So that just ticks over.
Yeah. When you get to the state or the stage where properties are mortgage free, puts income in your account every month, like just money.
Yeah. So obviously not in my name. They are in other entities that I wanted to buy them in just from an asset protection standpoint.
Yeah.
But they work perfectly fine. I can, borrow that money myself if I need it, or I can move the money around a little bit and kind of place it in where it's needed. But it's a really old trust. So it's one of those ones that I think very soon has to go.
Yeah, there'll be pressure for it to go. That's okay. Leave that in the hands of a very capable accountant.
Exactly. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So what else did you do? Are they the properties that you had to really take care of that were not great for your mum at a particular time that are now in a better position for you and her?
Correct. Yeah. And so in the same time, I was also kind of consulting for other people, consulting for different renovations around the place. I was helping other people kind of create renovations that they would be proud of. And I worked with this company, Maisonettes, pretty much since the beginning in 2017. And they were affiliated with a group that does room-by-room accommodation. Something I'd never really thought of, never really kind of put any thought into, to be honest, and a whole new concept for me. I suppose the biggest piece or biggest buzzword around that is boarding houses. Everyone knows boarding houses.
Yeah.
It was very similar, but it was creating upmarket, nice, affordable accommodation for people. It sounded like the way to go forward for the next one. I had a property in Stafford that was making nothing at that time. I think it was costing me about $2,000 a month. It was bought well over the market price. So the mortgage was actually, I think, $150,000 more than the valuation.
Ouch.
So even if I sold it, I would have been, up a certain creek without a paddle.
Yeah.
So I decided the easiest way to do it would be, it's an old Queenslander, it's almost high set. So I would have possibly been able to build underneath it if it was a little bit higher. Unfortunately not, doesn't matter. We'll renovate the whole house, turn it from a 2-bedroom with 3 family rooms and a single bathroom and an offset toilet, or almost like an outhouse, but raised up in the ground.
Yes. Yeah.
Into a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom rooming house, fully up to code, all up to spec. It was when you hear people talk about it, it sounds very easy, but I was in for a bit of a shock.
I remember we were running coaching classes at night time, and you would tune in the background with paint over almost every inch of you, and you always looked tired. You were doing very, very well, but you did a lot of that physically yourself. A lot of that work you did yourself.
At that stage, I'd been probably 2 years without steady work at that stage. So besides my consulting and a little bit of work on the side, I was effectively running these now full-time myself. So, and having 2 kids and, household to look after and all those, houses that you kind of paying money out of your pocket.
Yeah.
The funds were pretty low. And I decided,
Alex was running out of money. Yeah.
I was running out of money and running out of fumes as well at that stage.
Yeah.
And decided I'll just do it myself as best as I could. I enlisted the help of a lot of friends who may or may not be friends now. I don't know. Time will tell. Some of them haven't spoken to me since. But I brought them in, and we went through the whole place. I had to come up with a plan, talk with a town planner, talk with private certifiers. I had to make sure that everything was going to be to code, because you have to go through Brisbane City Council if you want to make it all legit and everything, which is exactly what I wanted to do.
Correct.
So that required building new walls, moving things around. Luckily, no removing of walls. I kept that to a minimum, but installing all brand new bathrooms, all new air conditioning units, kitchenettes, the whole, wet bars, I think is what they call them, but effectively nice little areas where people can wash their hands and do that kind of stuff. And then we still kept the main kitchen in the house, and that was communal, although I don't believe anybody really uses it, to be honest.
Oh, really? Okay. So they all function in their little kitchenette. And I remember you were doing a lot of digging across the yard. There was a lot of work went into that property.
Yeah. It was a big one.
It was a big one. All right. So tell us the results. So you've let it out?
Yeah. So it's fully let out now. It's run by an agency who specializes in room-by-room accommodation. Yeah. Who's run by a friend of mine, actually.
Yeah.
It was making $300 a week when I had it before I renovated, all that kind of stuff. It's now making about $1,000 a week.
Yes.
It cost me nearly nothing to run. I have a lot less problems now than I did. The tenants are so much better. Some of the tenants do kind of move in and out, and that's the nature of the beast, but I get the rooms filled almost straight away. Everyone's really happy. The tenants tend to really engage with each other, become really good friends, and they look after the house. And you tend to find one tenant who's really happy to kind of be, the matriarch or the patriarch of the house, and they run the roost And if you find one good one, then you kind of just keep them in there as long as possible, subsidize their rent, anything you can do to get these people to stay.
Yeah, I agree, because they look after the type of tenant that comes in and alert you to really early in the piece anybody who's not a social or cultural fit with their little with their little group.
And any maintenance issues. So many houses I've had where a maintenance issue's gone unattended for a year, and there goes a wall, you've got to pull the whole wall out or something like that. It's these ones, they really care about the house, and so they're really on it. Obviously, they don't go into other people's rooms and do inspections. I think that's probably overstepping there, but that's what your property manager's for, to do their inspections.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so your management fees are probably a little bit higher, are they, than just going through an average?
Yeah, I think I pay about 10-11%. So it's not crazy amount of money. Considering I did it when I first had the property, I did it myself.
Yep.
And the amount of work that is involved in doing that, if you don't live close, is insane.
Painful. Yes.
Exactly.
Get someone in to do that. Yeah, I'm all for, what do I call it? Strategy, not energy. Alex, we're in this for strategy, not energy.
Exactly. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway I've had from the last couple of years is don't do everything yourself. It's just a big expenditure of energy, and you're not necessarily the best person for the job.
It becomes, there's times when you've got to, like you were in a situation where you didn't have a lot of cash flow, you needed to sort this property out, and you have really beautifully, right? There's times where, and I look back at what Brett and I did as youngsters, doing our own gyprocking and all that kind of stuff like that we don't do anymore, and we choose not to. But back at the time we had, man, I think our interest rate was up near 17%. So we were lucky to eat. So we didn't have the luxury of calling in someone to do something like that. So good on you for doing it and getting through it. Right.
Well, I think learning those skills helps you understand when somebody is trying to BS you or not. When they come in for a quote and they tell you, oh, it's going to cost you this much, you go, oh yeah, but I've done it myself. It's not that bad.
Yeah. Or that's great. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. No worries. Take it.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
You do two of them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Awesome. So you've had your ups and downs with experiences, some good, some not so good, but you've pushed through and you've ended up with some really nice results for you and for your mum. How good? Have you ever spoken to her about like transitioning these properties from where they were to where they are now? And what does she think about it all?
Yeah, we speak about it fairly regularly, just to have a recap on what's going on.
Yeah.
I would say the reminiscing on how it used to be, I think we like to forget those times.
Yes.
Especially me.
Yeah.
So it's, my mum doesn't have to work anymore. She sits at home, does whatever she wants to do, helps with the kids as well. So there's not a lot that she has to complain about anymore. We live in a house where we've actually fully paid off the mortgage. We've got another property, we've fully paid off the mortgage. We only have another property after that, which has a fairly low mortgage. So we're currently sitting in a position where we're all right. We can survive. If interest rates decided to decline, we'd be okay.
You'd still be okay. So you feel, or your mum has gone from a position where these properties weren't working for her. They just were costing more than they were creating income, and you've gone from that position to just feeling like, it's okay. There's income there, there's some equity there, and everything's going to be all right, which is a really beautiful thing. So
I think it's only been in the last maybe year that feeling, that kind of unburdening of pressure has kind of really come off. And I think once you realize that you're in a position where, if everything went pairs up, you would be able to still survive. You'd have a roof over your head, and I think that's the most important thing. It's coming back. We're all running around so crazy busy all the time, and we're all stressed, and I totally get that. It's been my life and the life of almost everyone I know for the last couple of years. But being able to introspectively go in and see that you're actually in a position where you're going to be okay, is probably the most I'd say liberating feeling I felt in a really long time. So
yeah, I agree. To put it bluntly, there is a level of discomfort that people who invest in property feel at some point. Either they've borrowed a lot and properties haven't gone up immediately, or they're in the middle of a renovation while they're juggling their day job and their ordinary lives. Like there's some kind of level of discomfort. When you come through the other side and you think it's worth it, you can see that it's worth it on paper, but also you can feel it in your heart and your soul and your gut, and you can just relax. Then you look back and go, that wasn't so bad, that was all worth it. But at the time when you're in the trenches, it seems like a lot.
Well, and then you go and you borrow a whole bunch of more money to do the next one, and you go through the whole thing all over again.
Yes, you do. That's the fun of it all. All right, so you won't stop. You're going to continue to invest. And would you take on another big reno?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I find renos so far have been probably the most enjoyable. You can really get your hands dirty. You can get in there. It's fun. And you're watching it grow and change on a day-to-day basis. So to answer that question, absolutely. But in saying that, I wouldn't do that as my business plan for everything, because there are a few different things I'd like to try out that I haven't tried yet. Maybe building some townhouses or something like that. Just something that I can put a bit of me into, not, the normal flat pack housing townhouse. Something I can put my heart and soul into, but I want to really know the area so that I can go in there and I can get, at least if it doesn't go that well, I can pull the money out that I put into it and I can go on and move on to the next deal. That's the idea.
That sounds like a great plan. And I think as we move through, doing something like that will take less sweat. We'll call it sweat equity. It will take less physical stuff, but you'll still, or you should if you invest wisely, and I know that you will, you'll still experience the fruits of your labour. So I think that's a really good plan. If you could share one key message to anybody who is listening on to this, and they were thinking about getting started in property, what would that message be?
Don't overthink, but don't underthink.
Yeah.
It's one of these things. If you're going in it for the money, be honest with yourself and know that that's what you're going in it for. And if you are going in it for the money, I think we all have an inherent level of ego and pride that we want to put into our work.
Yeah.
And you need to know when to switch that off. Sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not. So understanding when a job needs to get done and it doesn't have to look pretty anymore, it just needs to get done, well, then it just needs to get done. And you have to roll the sleeves up, get it done, get it out and move on. Because if you sit there trying to make everything as beautiful as possible down to the last T, you can spend all your time and money doing it and it's not getting you any further to where you want to go. So I think being realistic with your expectations, realistic with why you've gone into the project in the first place is really helpful.
I agree. I remember you took on fixing up all of those windows in that last house. Do you remember the?
Oh, in Stafford. Can't forget it. I'd never puttied a window in my life. And all of a sudden, I think I had somewhere in the vicinity of 100 of them.
I remember thinking, he's never going to get through these windows. Anyway.
So that's for anyone who's never puttied a window before, it's an interesting experience. One or two, great, very cathartic work. When you get down to about 30, it starts to realise, what are you doing with your life? You're sitting there chiseling out old putty and you have to shave down the whole window, sand it all down, make sure it's all pretty again. And then you have to use a putty knife. I'd never even known what a putty knife was before that.
Yeah.
And you have to stick putty in there, which doesn't act in any way, shape or form to how I thought it might work. But, here we are. And it's linseed oil putty. So of course it doesn't dry straight away. You've got to wait a week or 2 weeks, and then you've got to paint it. Very time consuming job, but in saying that, it was probably one of the most enjoyable jobs I did.
Yeah.
Because there was a real art to it, Number one, you're really bad at it. You look at the first window you did, it looks horrible. By the time you finished, your windows look professional.
And those Queenslander windows, you just can't chuck them out. They're gorgeous. Or you can.
No.
You can in some circumstances. And if you had it over, you might have chosen to do that. But they're beautiful windows.
Well, you can't if you've got no money.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And the character of the home, they go a long way to really protecting the character of the home. Alex,
Yeah, absolutely.
thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for being really honest about and really open about, all of the feelings that go along with renovating and property investing, the good days and the days where, we all worry and overthink, and the days where you're tired. So I thank you so much for just sharing at the level that you did. Guys, if you'd like to work with Alex in any way, shape or form, I think the best way to get in connection with Alex is through masonettes.com, his website. And particularly if you're looking at letting a property out on some kind of short-term basis.
Yeah, so we actually work in Victoria, South Australia, New South Wales and Queensland. So we have teams in all the states. We do everything from cleaning and organising renos, funnily enough, interior decorating, the whole lot. We do have a lot of owners who actually love to work with us and do their own renos, and we just guide them along the process, and then they'll hand off their properties to us and we'll rent them out. So as we were saying before, 2020, 2021 has been an interesting time for short-term leasing, but in saying that, we've managed to survive pretty well. Most of our owners are getting a decent return, especially in the last couple of months. That for a lot of our owners, the last month made up for a whole year's worth of loss of income. So, that's the beauty of short-term leasing. You can go long periods of time without anybody in it, and then bang, there's $20,000 for a single month.
I agree. When it's on, it's on. Yeah,
exactly.
And I think everyone's a little bit excited and a little bit hopeful right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see it in the bookings coming through now, and especially with Queensland borders opening up, I foresee a lot of people just going, we have to move on. We have to go on with our lives. Let's do it. We'll travel around Australia, and that's going to be great for short-term leasing.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks so much, Alex.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Belinda.